The United States of America, a land of freedom, dreams, and power. It is a nation built on an idea that all people are created equal, endowed with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it is also a land of contradictions, a nation of immigrants that has struggled with inclusion, a beacon of liberty that was built, in part, by the labor of slaves. How did this great nation begin? How did a handful of small, rebellious colonies on the Atlantic coast grow to become the strongest superpower on Earth? This is the incredible story of America. Long before the arrival of Europeans, North America was already alive with civilization. This was not an empty land. It was a vast continent inhabited by millions of Native Americans. They were a tapestry of cultures, hunters, farmers, builders, and storytellers. In the Southwest, the Anasazi built towering cliff palaces. In the Mississippi Valley, the city of Cahokia rivaled London in size. In the Northeast, the Iroquois formed a great league of peace. Tribes like the Cherokee, Navajo, and Sioux had their own complex societies, traditions, and sacred lands. They lived in a profound balance with nature. Long before the word America was ever spoken, in 1492, a new chapter began. An Italian explorer, Christopher Columbus, sailing under the Spanish flag, reached the Americas. He was searching for a new route to Asia, but instead, he stumbled upon a new world. It was a collision of two worlds. Soon, explorers from Spain, France, and England followed, each seeking land, gold, and power. The Spanish built a vast empire in the south, seeking treasure. The French pushed deep into the interior, trading for furs. But it was the English who came to stay. In 1607, a small band of adventurers built their first permanent colony, Jamestown, Virginia. It was a dangerous, desperate beginning. They faced harsh winters, rampant disease, and conflict with the powerful Powhatan Confederacy. It was a struggle for mere survival. 13 years later, in 1620, another group, the Pilgrims, landed at Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts. They came not for gold, but for God, seeking the freedom to worship as they chose. These two colonies, one for profit, one for principle, marked the start of British America. Over the next century, 13 colonies stretched along the Atlantic coast, from the farms of Georgia to the bustling ports of Massachusetts. Each had its own character, its own economy, and its own spirit. They grew wealthy through farming, trade, fishing, and hard work. But they were not free. Britain, their mother country, controlled everything. It imposed strict laws on who they could trade with. And to pay for its own wars, it imposed taxes. Taxes on stamps, taxes on tea, taxes on everyday life. The colonists began to ask a dangerous question. Why should we be ruled by a king 3,000 miles across the ocean? Anger grew. In Boston, protesters threw tea into the harbor. In Philadelphia, thinkers like Benjamin Franklin and John Adams argued for liberty. The slogan "No taxation without representation" became a rallying cry. Protests and anger grew, until freedom became the only answer. That in 1775, at Lexington and Concord, the first shots were fired. War erupted between the colonies and the mighty British Empire. It was a fight for freedom, for the right to rule themselves. A year later, in 1776, the colonies made a bold, world-changing move. Meeting in Philadelphia, they signed the Declaration of Independence, written by the young Thomas Jefferson. The words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," echoed across the world. It was the birth certificate of the United States. But the war was far from over. The American Army, led by the steadfast George Washington, was a ragtag force of farmers and merchants. They faced the most powerful military on earth. Through bitter winters at Valley Forge, stunning defeats, and miraculous victories, they endured. After years of sacrifice and war, and with critical help from France, the impossible became real. In 1781, the British surrendered at Yorktown. In 1783, Britain officially recognized the independence of the United States of America. The new nation needed order. The first government was too weak, and the young country was falling into chaos. So in 1787, leaders gathered in a hot Philadelphia summer to write the U.S. Constitution. It was a masterpiece of compromise, creating a new government built on freedom, law, and a balance of power. It established a Congress, a president, and a Supreme Court. Crucially, they added the Bill of Rights, guaranteeing core freedoms of speech, of religion, and of the press. In 1789, George Washington, the man who held the army together, became the first president. The young republic soon began expanding westward. It bought the vast Louisiana Territory from France in 1803, doubling the size of the nation overnight. Washington sent explorers Lewis and Clark on an epic journey to map the uncharted lands all the way to the Pacific Ocean. But this expansion came at a terrible cost. This manifest destiny brought pain, as Native Americans were systematically and brutally forced from their ancestral homes, culminating in tragedies like the Trail of Tears. And another, deeper contradiction continued to divide the growing country. By the mid-1800s, the issue of slavery tore the nation apart. It was America's original sin. The Declaration had declared all men equal, yet millions of African Americans were held in bondage. The North, which was industrializing, wanted to end it or at least stop its spread. But the South depended on enslaved labor for its cotton-based economy. The nation was a house divided. When Abraham Lincoln, a prairie lawyer who opposed the spread of slavery, was elected president, the Southern states seceded, forming their own government, the Confederacy. War began in 1861. The Civil War was one of the deadliest conflicts in American history. It was a brutal 4-year struggle, brother against brother, state against state. Battles like Gettysburg and Antietam left tens of thousands dead. After 4 brutal years, the Union North triumphed. Lincoln's dream was fulfilled, but at a terrible cost. Slavery was abolished forever by the 13th Amendment. The United States was whole again, but scarred in mourning. Just days after the war's end, Lincoln himself was assassinated, a final tragedy in a nation's darkest chapter. After the Civil War, America changed with breathtaking speed. This was the Gilded Age. Factories rose, creating new jobs and new millionaires. Railroads stretched from coast to coast, stitching the continent together. Cities like New York, Chicago, and Pittsburgh exploded in size. And millions of immigrants from Europe, Asia, and all over the world arrived at Ellis Island, seeking a better life. They passed the Statue of Liberty, a new symbol of hope. Titans of industry like Andrew Carnegie, steel, and John D. Rockefeller, oil, built massive fortunes. Inventors like Thomas Edison lit up the world with the electric light bulb. It was the birth of modern America, full of ambition, invention, and raw energy. In 1917, America's isolation ended. The United States entered World War I, helping the Allies defeat Germany and reshaping the map of Europe. After the war, the country prospered in the Roaring '20s, a decade of jazz, automobiles, and celebration. But it was a prosperity built on debt. In 1929, the stock market crashed. The Great Depression of the 1930s brought economic collapse and widespread suffering. Millions were out of work. Families stood in breadlines. Then, a new, darker shadow fell across the globe, World War II. The U.S. tried to stay out. But in 1941, on December 7th, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The nation was stunned and unified. The sleeping giant was awake. American factories became the arsenal of democracy, building planes, tanks, and ships at an impossible rate. American soldiers fought across North Africa, Italy, and the beaches of Normandy in Europe, and island-hopped across the vast Pacific. By 1945, Nazi Germany was defeated, and 2 atomic bombs, a terrible new weapon, ended the war with Japan. The United States emerged from the ashes of the world stronger than ever. A global superpower had risen. The next battle wasn't fought with guns, but with ideas and influence. The Cold War pitted the United States against the Soviet Union. Democracy versus communism. For nearly 50 years, the world lived under the shadow of atomic fear, as both sides built nuclear weapons capable of destroying the planet. The 2 superpowers competed to control global politics, fighting proxy wars in places like Korea and Vietnam. But the Cold War also sparked incredible innovation. It fueled a new age of science, technology, and the race for space. In 1969, the entire world watched as Neil Armstrong took humanity's first steps on the moon, declaring, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." It was a victory for America and for the human spirit. At home, America was facing another kind of battle, the civil rights movement. Leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought to end racial segregation and finally make good on the promise of all men are created equal. Finally, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. The Berlin Wall fell. The Cold War was over, and the United States stood alone as the world's only superpower that the modern world. America faced new challenges. The 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001 shocked the nation to its core and changed global security forever. Long wars in Afghanistan and Iraq followed, testing the nation's resolve. Economically, America saw both booming prosperity and a deep recession in 2008. But innovation continued to lead the world. From the garages of Silicon Valley came the personal computer, the internet, and the smartphone, changing how every human on the planet lives, works, and connects. From Hollywood, American movies and music became the shared language of global culture. From 13 small colonies to a continental nation, from a bloody civil war to a global superpower. The story of America is a story of constant struggle and constant reinvention. It is a nation that has often failed to live up to its highest ideals, yet has never stopped striving for them. The American experiment is not over. It is a story still being written every day by its 330 million people. It remains as it began, a land of freedom, a land of dreams, and a land of power, a civilization that, for better and for worse, has defined the modern world.